A thing I've been doing since starting the podcast is, bulk of my guests, all of them so far, I should say, have just been revisiting, right? So it's not like fresh new faces necessarily. However, enough time has passed, or there's a lot of shit that has probably happened for you. Do you know what episode number you were on when you were last on the podcast 5 years ago?
I'm guessing 48.
Dude, that's close. That is really
Like,
close. It is 49.
that's amazing.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, your episode was the second episode where I actually started doing what do you call it? Thumbnails on YouTube.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so there's like all these videos started. I think John and Alicia Farmer were the first ones to have a thumbnail, and then you and everyone else after. So
Very nice. Well, I love it and I feel special. And thank you for having me back on. I'm very excited to see you.
yeah, no, I'm excited to catch up for starters, and also um, I don't know, five a lot has happened in 5 years. Um, like I think let me double check real quick. Like your episode came out on July 17th, 2021. So literally 5 years ago, as if like, when was that? Hold up,
Wow.
was that Friday?
I think it was.
Okay.
Wow. 5 years ago. That is wild.
That
And
is
it's
wild, right?
also wild to think of it was 2021 because I think that's right before Film Quest happened and we had the premiere. It was
Yeah.
either right after or it was right before. I think it was in May,
What
possibly.
which one what movie was premiering then?
My film, Love Spell.
That's right. Yeah, 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 yeah. You were on talking about that. You're also talking about your writing stuff, and also you weren't, if I recall correctly, when you were in Utah. I mean, you're not from Utah, and we could probably touch on that, but like you were kind of new to Utah in the film scene and trying to make connections that way, you know?
Oh yeah.
Um, so it was kind of cool to see your approach to everything from your Love Spell film, and then also trying to make these connections with people in Utah. And um, you've since, you're no longer here, sad face. So
Oh, well, I'll be back. I'll come visit, I promise.
a lot's happened. What has happened since 2021, Miss Emily Clark?
Well, my book came out last year, which tells the tales of my life and time in Utah, mostly, and other, other chapters. But here's the hardcover designed by Elizabeth Welch. On the cover, she's a Utah-based artist who I'm a big fan of, and I was like, "Can we please put this on the cover of my book?" And she said yes, and I was very happy about that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I had no idea you released a book. What was the title? Morning.
Oh, morning comes roaring down the mountain. See the mountain.
Yeah, and look at that art. That's so cool.
Thank you. Me on the back. Kind of see.
So to publish your book, did you get it done through like a publishing house, or was it kind of like a self-published kind of route?
Not self-published. It got accepted by an award-winning publishing house based out of Kentucky. So I was very excited. It's a woman-owned company. And yeah, I was very thrilled. But just to kind of like segue back to everything. So I was in Utah. A lot happened. My father unfortunately passed away in 2021. So that was really difficult. It kind of happened very suddenly. So yeah, so a lot of the poems kind of wrestle with being or feeling alone or isolated in Utah, like being away from my family, and then being with my father and getting to spend time together, which was amazing, getting to reconnect because he kind of randomly moved to Utah. And it was just kind of a funny story. And my partner at the time, his family was from Utah. And so we did something. We were in California at the time when we were like Googling, and I said, "Oh, I've never been to Utah." And he was like, "Oh, well, we have to go visit sometime." He was going to be playing a show there. And so we were going to stay with his family. And he was like, "Well, do you happen to know where your dad lives?" And I was like, "No, we're not really in touch that much." But I think he texted me his address. So he's like, "Okay, yeah, like let me know." Cause I know, he's like, "I know Utah like the back of my hand." So I'm like, "Okay." So I text the address. It's like Bard Lane, which is super cool because we got writers in my family. My dad used to write poetry and stuff. And it was 15 minutes from his childhood home, which is,
Wow.
yeah, it felt very synchronistic and fated, kind of. And so I'm really glad that I ended up in Utah, even though it was not my perfect, ideal dream place. It was a place that I kind of randomly found myself in. But I mean, I was excited to be there. It was just one of those things where I left all my furniture and everything in a storage unit in California, and I was planning on moving back after we toured the US together. And then when we broke up, I was like, man, I've been living out of a suitcase for like a year and a half. I want to get my own place. I want to make my film. I want to make these things happen. And yeah, Utah just, it was like, ding, ding, the universe was like, this is where you're supposed to be for a little bit. So I'm like, okay. And yeah, I mean, it was great. I actually got engaged, well, in Paris the following year, which is pretty wild. And it was a guy that I met in Utah. And so, yeah, so we had this very romantic engagement in Paris and traveled around Europe together. Went to Amsterdam and got to visit my brother who lives over there and stuff. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was kind of like a whirlwind, all these things kind of happening and life events slamming together. I was working on music and then like joined a band for a little bit and then started judging for a film festival and was still doing Sundance events and things like that, doing press for Sundance. So by the time I want to say, yeah, 2022, I mean, that little blip in time was just such a major time. And I can say, oh, I also flew out to Nashville that spring to record new music at a studio, which was like honestly the best part of that year. I mean, besides getting engaged and getting to travel a lot and all that stuff and reconnect with my family, it was like getting to go to Nashville and record original music was just like a huge lifelong dream. So I was really excited to do that. And I worked with an awesome guy named Jordan Grubbs at Magic Square Studios. And I highly recommend him if anyone needs an awesome small studio. It was great. And then I released the new single called Country Girls, which is kind of like a alternative folk or kind of alt country.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so released that in 2024, I believe, and it won an award, which is cool, and like a festival. And then we ended up filming the music video that fall, so that was cool. We filmed in a historic church in a historic park in Alabama, and it was two wonderful people from, I think they've been in LA for like 15 to 18 years as mostly editors in the film industry. They moved back east and they had just moved back east like I think a couple months prior. And they're like, yeah, we'd love to be a part of it. So I was super excited to get to work with them. They were super nice and very professional. And everything just kind of came together. That feeling when things just kind of fall into place. There was an actor from Atlanta who flew out who was really sweet and got to work with him. He played my boyfriend in the video. So that was cool. And yeah, I mean, like, honestly, that was a dream come true too. So just trying to think what else. So the book, music video, and then I just finished my latest single called My Hero, which I plan on releasing this fall.
How so with your book, I want to touch on your book real quick. You
Sure.
said so is it more is it purely written with poems and stuff, or is there like short stories and other like narrative stuff in there, or I guess what does it all encompass?
Yeah, great question. So it is poetry. It is a chapbook. So I'm working on the full length collection now. Let me see if you can see it. And if you'd like, I could read you a poem.
Sure.
They're very short, a lot of them. So, okay, so this one is about a specific place in Utah. It's called Cascade Springs. Have you been there?
I have not been there. Well, not that I know of. How's that? Not that I can recall.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. Cascade Springs. And I wrote this for my dad. Let the wide, wild world draw you in like a stone. Let the bold blue mountain be your comfort, your home. Let the plums you eat be fresh, like watercress walking on water, speaking to the air like juniper flowers. Take a walk with me there, winding path flower.
I love it.
Thank you.
Um, I'm assuming that is a location that probably meant a lot to your dad somehow, right?
Yes.
I'm looking at photos of it online right now.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, all the fairy waterfalls, pretty magical.
Yeah, one it has these photos have a bunch of, fall leaves and stuff behind it, and I think it's just a really cool aesthetic to it. Looks really pretty.
But if you do want to read one of my short stories, you can get this one. This came out in 2023, I think.
Utah's Best Poetry and Prose 2023.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. But one of my short stories is in here. It's called The Weaver. It's about a woman who is madly in love with Lancelot, and she loses her sight. She becomes blind, but she's a weaver. She's a seer, and she's weaving these tapestries for the king. And she weaves the future for the king, basically, like the victories and everything. He has her weave into the tapestries. And so the story takes place when she has a premonition of her love, Lancelot. I mean, they're not together anymore. They had a youthful romance, and now she's, I don't know, middle aged, and so is he. They haven't seen each other. She's like, oh my God, like I still love Lancelot. So she sees him dying, actually, like getting struck in battle. And she's so overcome with grief that she lies and she weaves the victory into the tapestry. And when the king finds out, he hangs her for it. That's the story.
When you get in your writing state, do you have like a routine to kind of get your headspace to be ready to write, and either like do you know if it's going to be poetry or if it's just going to be prose or screenwriting or anything like that?
Good question. I would say the best way that I write is when I don't plan it out, when I just let it come naturally. If I try to force it or like pre-plan, like, okay, I'm gonna work on my screenplay today, for some reason, I think it's just my inner child is like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So I really have to, I mean, of course, I can set aside the time on my calendar and then just
Yeah.
allow it to happen, but I just have to make it a little bit more natural, I guess. And um, one of my favorite talks on creativity is from John Cleese, and he talks about how creativity is kind of like play, and we do have to kind of segment time around it. And it does have to be a separate activity than our normal closed mode, is what he calls it. He calls it The creative mode is the open mode where we're really receptive and we are like children at play. It's like literally um, the same kind of thing. And so I would say for me, poetry and songs, the same way they just come to me, and it's usually around water or doing one of the INGs like running, walking, um, washing dishes, showering, driving, those kind of INGs, like those activities really stimulate that kind of meditative state for me. And then I just naturally start singing, or the line will just kind of come to me. Like I had one that just got published in the spring. Let me see.
You and all your publishings.
Oh,
I
I was really excited about this one.
think it's so
Maybe
cool.
I can read it to you. Thank you. So yeah, it just kind of depends. With screenwriting, I'm actually developing my own methodology, which I'm super excited about, and I can't wait to share it with the world, hopefully soon. But one of the reasons why I'm creating a new methodology is because the contemporary models for screenwriting, or all the classes I've taken and stuff, I mean, don't get me wrong, I learned a lot, but there were just so many gaps for me as a neurodivergent person, ADHD, and also I have some dyslexia, and it was hard for me to kind of grasp the concepts the way, like my brain just was like, no, like it just kept rejecting things. And I'm like, you know what? I need to learn this my own way and figure it out what works best for me personally. And I think I just recommend that for a lot of people is like figuring out what works best for you might be very different than someone else. And so one of the things, and even though I guess, adapted to a lot of things that like Robert McKee talks about, like his screenwriting methods and stuff, it was stuff that was like buried in the back of the book, by the way. And I just want to mention that because I got very frustrated because like I've read the book over and over, like his storybook many times. And, I read it in college when I was first introduced to screenwriting in like 2011, I want to say. But I didn't discover that one piece of information, which literally would have changed my life profoundly on how I approach screenwriting if I had read that first, if that was like in chapter one. And so that's kind of the process for me with screenwriting has been discovering a new way to write that works for me, that I don't get writer's block, that I can get into the flow and be really happy with the process and enjoy the process. And so that's what I'm teaching other people, doing a writing retreat in the spring at a writer's colony in the mountains. It's going to be really cool. And please, everyone, sign up. Actually, I think there's only 8 spots where you can stay there, but they have a chef and there will be dinner and there will be lunches provided and everything is made there. It's one of the top like travel destinations. It's a very magical city. People just go there, and because of the natural springs and everything, it's almost like a vortex, kind of like Sedona or Asheville. There's these certain places that just have like this spiritual energy. This place definitely has that. And it's kind
Well,
of a hippie town too. Yeah.
what town is it? What place is it?
Eureka Springs, Arkansas.
Arkansas.
Yeah.
Dang. I have never heard anyone recommend Arkansas in my life until now.
It, I know, like I said, it's not expected, but it's really cool.
I think it's awesome. Like that's a state name you don't really think of as being a state, right? Like it's not on the list, but I don't know. Hearing it described like that, I'm like, oh, sign me up.
Hmm. Well, it depends on where you go in Arkansas. And I'm not saying anything that Arkansas is a beautiful state. It is, but it's the natural state. It is a beautiful place. I have not explored much of Arkansas outside of, I've been to Little Rock. I've been to Bentonville, which is amazing. Bentonville Film Festival. I just got back from that about three
Yeah.
weeks ago. That was great. But yeah, and then Eureka Springs is in the mountains and it's also a Victorian town with a really cool haunted hotel, which you and I have to chat about later because I want to do a writer's retreat at the hotel too.
Yeah,
At
let's
some,
be inspired like Stephen King, huh?
yeah, yeah. I don't know. Did I answer your question with the writing?
You did, you did. What is the, I guess, what was the guy's name that the book you read?
Oh, it's up here. Robert McKee.
Or Robert McKee, what was his one piece that you found at the end of his novel that where you're like, this should have been right from the get-go, right?
Yeah, he talked about how dialogue is last. Like Hitchcock talks about that as well. But he talked about basically his process is he recommends having all these folders for your characters, having folders for everything, right? Before you even start approaching your screenwriting software, you have, I guess, dossiers on the characters and all that kind of thing. Um, as you're building the world and building the story. But then the main takeaway was you're basically writing a treatment, like the screenplay, you're writing the treatment without the dialogue, which I really love that approach. And so approaching it that way, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this makes it so much more enjoyable. And it's also, I mean, just, I've just grown a lot as a writer because like I looked at one of my screenplays, which was inspired by the Odyssey, actually, since the Odyssey came out, which I just saw this weekend. Very excited. And yeah, so I had written this script called Renaissance, and it's like an adaptation of the Odyssey, but very loose adaptation, but still adaptation. And one of the things that I first noticed, and I wrote this like 10 years ago, but I open up the document because I'm going to send it to a friend or whatever, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, like I'm looking at my notes and my outline, and there's just so much dialogue in there, and I just don't write that way anymore. Like the dialogue is the last thing that I even think about.
That's so interesting because I'm the complete opposite. I love dialogue. Without it, with movies without dialogue make me realize just how much screen there is in between, you know? And it's like all the small details that are being captured in the camera. And I get intimidated by that because I'm like, I want to capture everything as a writer, you know, really have it conveyed for whoever's directing it. But um, hearing that dialogues last, I mean, really, that does kind of force you to focus on what makes a movie feel like a movie, you know, like what makes it move.
Yes, so movement is part of it. So I teach this. I teach the um, my discovery was that after I became a filmmaker and started work, like even just as a script supervisor on a couple sets last year in LA and Mississippi and stuff, one of my takeaways was like learning just from being on set that all the different departments, all the processes, like script supervisor, even though technically we are our own department, we're part of the camera department. And so it's a really nice place to be, especially on an independent. This is a low budget SAG-AFTRA film feature, but it was nice because I was very close to the director the whole time. I was like glued to his side. He will tell you that too. um, and the cinematographer, and then the first AC. So we were all buddies and we all hung out together. But there was this kind of symbiosis of being around that. And I was kind of like a sponge. I'm like, oh, please teach me. Like, I'm not talking, but I'm just listening to them plan things out, plan out the shots, plan everything out. And it just was so enriching. And so part of those kinds of experiences, I've been taking that and putting it back, kind of reverse engineering. Movies is another thing that I do with my students, so that we can look at the visual language as a whole. So we look at, for example, we look at movement, we look at mise en scene, so atmosphere in general, and then mise en scene, like David Lynch's films. We look at, I can say, subtext, of course, character in action or character through action, I mean. So we're looking at the behavior, what the character does or doesn't do, does or doesn't say, what goes unsaid, all of those elements, all the elements of movement. the subtext, the the atmosphere, so the music, like in The Mood for Love. That film is a great example. Yeah, so anyway, so there's just these different examples of cinematic language that we look at. And the more that I've studied them, and I'm still studying them, but the more that I learn that language, the better I become as a screenwriter, because it's almost, I think of it as building a house, right? So we start with the foundation, and we can't paint the walls and we can't put up hang pictures, which to me is like the dialogue. Like I can't do those. Of course, it's very important, but I can't pick out the colors and I can't do those things until I have the foundation built first. And so once kind of getting that foundation, and of course, structure is important, but structure also, I treat that kind of as a separate thing. And yeah, and then basically the character development and then the world building. It's almost like I've compartmentalized in my brain all these different areas, just kind of like segmenting the different parts of the house that need to be put together, the different elements. And then I start to put them together. And it,
So, are you more of like an outliner before you start writing?
mhm. Yeah, so I definitely stick with the beat sheet. I try to do Frank Daniel method, which is the eight sequence method, that like a Hollywood method. It's been around since I want to say like the 1920s or something.
Yeah.
But I don't just use that. I also look at nonlinear storytelling. I look at different things. Like for example, I really like to utilize kind of a cyclical or even like a spiral approach and look at things that way in terms of structure.
Yeah.
But definitely, like I have to have some kind of a structure in place, and then I've also taught myself to know the ending too. And it is hard, but of course, it's probably going to change. This ending in this current screenplay is definitely already evolved a few times.
I always, like, for me, I always know the ending before I start writing at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, I have like this, it can always be like a simple shot or just like a piece of dialogue, right? And then it just kind of unravels from there. So it's like working backwards, being like, well, how do we get there kind of thing.
Oh,
Uh, Um, I've outlined stuff in the past, but it's always like, the even the tone and the voice in the script feel different than like if it was me just naturally discovering the story alongside, characters or whatever. Um, but then even though like I think I know the ending, sometimes the ending doesn't like what you're just saying, like it doesn't always happen that way at all, and sometimes like at the end it starts fighting against itself, like not wanting to end that way, which is really weird. But
that's very intriguing, and I like that. It's unusual for me personally because I'm kind of opposite. I usually
yeah,
know the beginning and not the end. So that's very cool. I find that quite mysterious.
it's fun. Writing's fun. And it's never the same for everyone, right? Like I like what you said though about like, how structure can be kind of played with, right? Because you're focusing mostly on the foundation first, right? Because without a strong foundation, you can have a cool ass structure and they could crumble with zero foundation, you know? So if you build the foundation and give it enough space and freedom to do the nonlinear stuff, which I think that is to tell a story nonlinear, like is very talented. I mean that takes a different approach entirely to like not only the emotions but also the needs and wants of characters and what the audience is able to retain, like you have to keep that in mind too. And um so you brought up the Odyssey and I'm like, well, that was nonlinear, but I'm just like this editing of Nolan films
Yeah,
is a story art craft in itself, but then like the scripts are also in that way too. And just I don't know. It's such a cool approach. So hearing you that you want to start playing with that too, I think it's cool.
thank you. I agree with you. It reminds me, you mentioned Christopher Nolan because he is definitely someone that I really admire and look up to for that very reason, like Memento. I think he was really original in looking at the nonlinear films. I know I just saw. The last comment with that is that it reminds me of playing chess. Yeah, my dad was really good at chess. Speaking of, I don't know why I'm mentioning that, but I've always wanted to be good at chess because it's thinking far ahead and it's planning your moves and also having different moves in mind. Like I could do this, this, and this. I think that takes a special kind of mental discipline.
Approaching writing like chess is such an interesting concept because there's so many different roles on the board, right? And each one is strategically placed, and that's how you beat chess. So it's like kind of some kind of like a metaphor of like just a writer being at battle with their own mind with all these different ideas, right? Is that kind of like how you're viewing it, kind of a thing, or
Oh, I like that. Yes and no.
yeah,
Also, just from a structural standpoint. Yes, I think battle, maybe in the sense of harnessing the powers of thought, which can be difficult and challenging.
yeah,
And one of the exercises that I do and teach my students is a meditative exercise. And I teach a lot of observational exercises as well, because I think it really helps to get outside of the mind as well. So I think the chess metaphor for me is about learning how to plan um, the structure and the plot specifically, but not necessarily the creative details, if that makes sense.
that makes sense. Do you find the creative details come in later drafts for you?
Um, well, no, I'm very visual. So like this, so I'm working on not to say too much about it, but it's a Southern Gothic horror. And I like symbolism and the whole, I guess I would say my whole modus operandi is to look at life as a someone who looks for patterns and recognizes patterns and also wants to interpret those symbols that are intrinsic to nature, whether that's the natural world or human nature. And because it is a symbolic language film, um, for me, I've started approaching cinema like a poet, I guess is what I would say. Like maybe like Tarkovsky is one of my favorite filmmakers, and yeah, so like Mirror is one of my favorite films, which it's like a poem, and he has his father's actual poems in it, which is really cool. We'll have to watch it together if you haven't seen it.
I have, I think I've seen one movie of his.
Okay, well, we got to watch Mirror, and it's on Criterion.
Mirror.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a watch list. He seems like
Um,
a he's Russian based, right?
Yeah. Soviet Union. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll chat later because I don't remember what the movie I watched was, but I was like, this is fucking genius.
Right. He's amazing. Yeah. He's like
And
the OG. Yeah.
yeah, well, I feel like you see a lot of that influence, and now I'm like kind of like in the bigger scope of cinema, right? Like with these bigger ideas being kind of explored on the big screen, like oh, there's these underlying subconscious themes of what they were exploring in those experimental 3 hour movies, like
Yeah.
it's they're influencing just modern day directors who are influencing people not knowing what they're being influenced by, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I like that. That's a cool way to say it. Yeah. I agree. And I think cinema is always evolving.
Yeah.
Another um, another writer I really like is Andre Bazin. What is Cinema is really good. It's a collection of essays, and it's surprisingly very refreshing to read it again today. Like I was recently revisiting some of the essays on like montage and adaptation, and it was cool to hear his perspective on I know it was almost like this is I want to say in like the was it the 60s or the 70s. Forgive me for not remembering which decade, but I think the 60s. And he was talking about almost like people adapting a novel or something to the film. And he was saying like nowadays, as in like the 1960s, a lot of people were writing a novel with the idea that they were going to make it into a film. So already kind of writing it as if it were cinematic, right? And so his whole, I guess, argument was about how things are constantly evolving. And I really liked how cool he was about the future. He was like, yeah, man, like cinema is still going to be evolving and it's not stagnant and it's not like it's going to keep getting better, I guess. It's not over for cinema. And yeah, he was like the people in the future are going to keep making original art. Oh, I think it was something like it's going to be just as good as the work from the past. I think that was his argument. Was almost like people will say, "Oh, we have this one great director like Stanley Kubrick. We'll never have another Stanley Kubrick again." And he was like, his argument is like, "Of course not, because Stanley Kubrick existed in that era in that very specific time in history. And so we can't compare someone from the future and say, oh, we'll never have that again. Like, of course not. It doesn't mean that Stanley Kubrick is better than a filmmaker today, essentially." And I thought that that was a really, I'm sorry, I don't know how to turn these off my phone. Um, that was a really intelligent response, I thought.
Yeah. It puts things into perspective of we idolize creatives to a very specific extent, right? Where we automatically start comparing them to uh others alike. Um, like, me personally, I love Denis Villeneuve. Like he's my top director currently.
Mhm.
But I can also see that where he was influenced by, right? Like what movies he watched and got inspired by. And when you look at those filmmakers and who they watched and got inspired by, right? So they kind of copy and embody it, these other creatives before them, but then they make it their own, which I think is the whole point of art. Like it's always meant to express and expand on itself throughout the decades through different interpretations.
Mhm.
I think it's cool. It's a really cool way to look at it.
Thanks. Yeah, and I like what you said too. And yeah, I'm a huge Villeneuve fan too. I love Dune. So good.
I watched that trailer so many times. Anyway,
Oh, which one? Dune.
Dune 3.
Oh my gosh, I haven't seen it.
After this Zoom call, you got to go watch Dune 3's trailer.
I will. I can't wait.
Um, I'm just so excited. But anyway,
When
huge Dune
does
fan.
it come out?
December 18th,
Right after my birthday.
which is
Yay.
also I don't know if you saw, but today Avenger or was it yesterday? I don't remember. Maybe it was yesterday. Anyways, Avengers released their trailer finally.
I just watched it yesterday.
And it's supposed to be released on December 18th.
Ooh.
And now people are trying to make it kind of like the Oppenheimer and Barbie, the Barbenheimer mashup, right?
Oh,
So like,
okay.
oh hey, we'll go see Doomsday, right? Where it's Dune and then Doctor Doomsday put together kind of a thing. And I don't know how to feel about that though, because they're both fighting for the actual literal big screen for the same exact reason.
Well, okay, and how long are these films going to be? Do you know?
I
The run.
don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. And it's also they're both expected to do very well in the box office, right? It would be cool to see it team up and actually, make it like support movies kind of a thing, right? Support the theaters, but
I'll go see
uh
them both same day if you do.
yeah, right? I've already spent like 6 hours watching The Odyssey. Almost made it 9 on Sunday, like uh
Whoa.
I I love these long movies.
Me too.
So if you end up sitting 6 hours, 7 hours in a movie theater in one day, it's no different than watching like Lord of the Rings extended. Like,
That's a really good point.
yeah. But um anyway, I don't know where we got onto that tangent. But
Okay. I have
with
a,
your
oh, go
you have a
ahead.
question?
Oh, no, no, no. I was going to share a quote.
Yeah, sure.
So this is from Letters to a Young Poet. This is one of my favorite poets, Rainer Marie Rilke. And it's the future enters into us in order to transform itself in us long before it happens.
What do you make of that?
Hmm. I want to sit with it for a while. What about you?
I think there's an element of truth to it. But because the future is never certain, right? The only thing that's certain is what we do right now in the present.
Hmm.
Meaning every action we do now impacts that, but you can perceive like what the future could be and try to do actions to get there, right? Which would then align with a future version of yourself kind of stepping backward, aligning that moment, right?
You want to hear something cool?
Yeah.
My friend Caroline told me recently this idea of the future being behind us, not in front of us. I forget the tradition, but it maybe from some older tradition was the idea that because we can see the past, so the
Mhm.
past is in front of us, but we're actually walking backwards into the future
With our backs turned, like we
with
were,
the back away. Yeah, I mean, turn towards the future. Yeah.
damn, that's weird. But like, why? I guess like all of our metaphors of time can only be seen as a linear thing, right?
Depends on the tradition.
Like, like, is there a tradition that doesn't see it as such, I guess?
Absolutely. I don't see time as linear either, by the way.
No, it's hard.
But
Well, it's hard not to see it.
I imagine it as counterclockwise when I think about the year because I'm like dyslexic or whatever. So I see things, but I'm also left-handed. But I didn't realize this was a thing until I started like researching it, and it goes back to like witches and paganism and lots of cool stuff, by the way. But the wheel of the year and all this kind of stuff. But I guess the point is when I think about a year and I physically picture it, I picture a circle and I picture like here's December, which is my birthday, and then the spring is on the left, summer is at the bottom, fall is on the right, and then winter's up here. But it goes in this counterclockwise way.
Because we view counterclockwise as backwards, right?
Well, what I mean is most people think of a clock or they think of the year as moving clockwise.
Yeah, yeah. So with the counterclockwise, like
Hmm.
I would be like, what does the counterclockwise mean throughout all history? You know, like all these like ancient civilizations and stuff.
It
Because
has to do with the sacred feminine, I think, is what it
mm,
is. Because we've lost that, right? Because we have patriarchy and we have had patriarchal societies for the last, what, 10,000 years or something.
yeah,
So if you go back to like deep time when we had like goddess culture and the idea of the serpent, the left hand, all of these elements are like the what like with the yin and the yang, it's like the is it the yang which is the I forget which one is like the masculine and feminine energy.
I don't
Um
know.
the dark side is yin. So that's what I'm talking about. Is the yin side. But then we're focused on the yang side in modern contemporary because everything is about forward action and movement and those kinds of and when I speak of like feminine versus masculine energy, I'm not talking about gender, by the way. I'm talking about like an energy in the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or internal, external. Yeah. Different ways to think about it.
Well, it's because viewing it like with the duality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of oh, that's fucking thunder.
Oh, really?
That's sick. Okay, that's sick. Sorry, that was a distraction.
It's okay.
That was a
That's
lot of
cool.
boom. But with the duality though, you have to keep the balance, right? And when things are out of balance for too long, the skills have got to revert back. But when you revert back, you also do risk the doing too much going the other way, right? And so like it's like we all have to like find that inner balance of our experiences now, I guess, as on an individual basis, right? Like every day, like we're always trying to find balance within our
Mm-hmm.
own experiences. But then like when you feel like look at what's going globally or, you know, all the awful stuff going on, it's like we have to also keep the balance collectively and try to find a way to harmonize that, to keep the peace, right?
Well, you want to hear an interesting idea?
Hmm.
Let's see. Let me look up the theory. So this goes back to the Eastern philosophy with the yin yang and the idea of um, the north yang and the south yin as complementary magnetic opposites transform into one another to maintain the universal balance. But there's this idea that maybe things might be shifting on the planet naturally, like Mother Nature shifting the poles so that we restore the balance that way.
Yeah, it's a huge possibility, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also with the sun switches its poles constantly too. I don't know if you knew that.
It did
Uh,
really cool.
yeah. And when it does that, either we have active flares or we don't really have an active period, right? I think that could be me speaking on my ass, but I think that makes sense scientifically. Uh,
Oh, and here's the other thing is that when we look at nature, nature is constantly shedding. So, as a person who goes through a monthly cycle, I will say that I'm used to out with the old and with the new. Like, as a woman, that's like a natural thing I'm used to, just like the trees lose their leaves and go through that progress of loss and then into the spring where new life is birthed, that's part of nature. But I think we've lost that. We've become so attached to productivity and work mode and being in that cycle, which is really unnatural. And we need, just like, look at the forest fires. That's nature saying, hey, this is part of the natural process. And indigenous people in the United States knew that, and they would purposely do scheduled burns. Even where I live in Florida, they understood that many, many years ago. The Appalachian people would burn, do the, scheduled planned burns. And so I guess what I'm getting at is that this concept of we are so advanced today, we have so many advancements, like, hey, check ourselves. Like, are we really? Or is everything just a giant spiral? And in fact, because if you think about it from a logical standpoint, how many of us have watched a movie? So, here, let's test my theory. Like, A Star is Born. Let's say you're 16 years old and you go to watch Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best movie ever. It just came out. And then your mom or your grandma says, actually, that movie has been made like 3 or 4 times. I forget how many. And you're like, no way. And they're like, yes, way. When I was young, when I was your age, that movie came out. So, what I'm getting at is that we are ignorant to the farming practices, even that our great grandparents did, that were much more natural and helpful to Mother Earth than the farming practices that we think are the best practices, or we think maybe just we're like, oh, we've always done it this way. It's actually no, 70, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, whatever, we had totally different farming practices, and it got changed after World War II or around that time, is when we started changing some of our farming practices. So I guess my point is, because we have such a fragmented world today, which is part of what I want to do with my own methodology and teaching people and stuff, is to reconnect the dots of, um, you know, finding the pieces of their own lives to find meaning, to connect to each other. There's this whole thing about building purpose, which is really what I want to do. And yeah, so anyway, not to get too off topic, but the idea is just that what if when we think that we are so advanced today, and then we find out the CDC, like, because they're understaffed today, they were not able to catch whatever that parasite is that's in all the lettuce now. And just a perfect example of we don't have the control that we think we have. And every time that we arrogantly say, oh, we're so developed, or oh, we have AI now, or oh, we have this or that, something else that they were more advanced in 200 years ago is missing. Does that make sense what I'm saying? It's
No, it
like,
makes, yeah. Do you think we use creativity as a way to contain control or even obtain it to a degree? And like, is it only humans who want control or is it part of our journey to learn to just, roll with the punches kind of a thing?
yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Let me see here. So I guess I would say that creativity is an aspect of consciousness, is an aspect of universal truth, of the design of universal intelligences. And in order love, to love each other, to love the universe, love God, whatever, our concept is of the other, right? Of beingness or what is beyond us, we have to communicate. But what is communication? Communication is the conscious awareness that there is another outside of ourselves. So that means that the universe itself is aware of itself and is also aware that it has multiplicity, right? So if we look at it that way, and if we think of the universe as being a yin and yang um, design or in process of co-creating with one another in this, whether we call it the masculine feminine energies or the yin yang energies interweaving, just like I think of it like a helix on the DNA, right? There's this constant back and forth, which causes the transformation. But in order to do that, there has to be language. And how do we get what do we get from language? Language, or why do we have language? What is language? Language is the awareness or the consciousness that, like I said, that there is somebody or something that is other than us. And that's how we're able to love, even though that energy is still connected to the wholeness and completeness of the universe. It's all one energy, but it expresses itself in otherness. And so, human consciousness, not to get too off topic, but is how the universe experiences itself through the human body, right? So it can have um, an embodied experience. And how do we express that experience? What is love? It is having a physical experience. It's kissing someone, right? It's actually tasting, it's touching, it's movement, it's actual embodiment. And so when you mentioned about the communication, I'm thinking, well, we need symbols to communicate. And symbols are um, how we think about relationship and how we identify ideas so that a symbol becomes really meaningful. But it's not, we don't just have symbols just to have symbols. A symbol is a form of communication, a form of language. And we use the language in order to communicate. And why do we communicate? We communicate so that we can establish meaning. And we establish meaning so that we can love and so that we can experience oneness again.
That's well said.
The last part is okay. I wrote this down, so I'll read it because that way it
Okay.
doesn't get scrambled in my brain. Symbols become patterns. Patterns become myths. Myths become meaning. Meaning becomes purpose, and purpose leads us toward greater self-love, greater love for each other, and a more conscious life.
What is behind the doorway of love, though?
It is the universe. The universe is love. Consciousness is love, is what I would argue.
Just like Interstellar. To all the naysayers, right?
Yeah.
No, I love that. And you're able to pick up on all that being a writer, being the creative, right? You're being like a conduit, essentially, right? To I guess, your interpretation of like what you're tapping into or what's being fed to you, kind of thing. Um, because I've always thought there's times like when I have this great idea, but then a couple years later, this idea is already being done on a
Mhm.
on a movie, right? And it's like, where did that idea stem from, right? And I'm half convinced that there's like a pool of all this idea, right? That not any not any one particular creative can tap into. It's like just anyone can tap into at any given
Yes,
time,
yes, yes.
right?
I love that.
Um, so that I think just goes more into that too. I think it's just cool.
I agree with that. And I'm currently building something. I'll just give you a little taste of it, okay?
Yeah.
Because it's still in process. But so Modern Mythic, which is the production company or the LLC that I started in 2025, I have produced a short project with it and some other projects, but it's starting to become more than that. It's starting to become an integrated philosophy, a methodology, which is also part of the camera's eye, which is what I teach in the screenwriting methodology, in a creative ecosystem. And the purpose is to help people become conscious creators of their own lives. So through observing symbols, tracking patterns, developing their personal mythology, which is the upcoming class I'm teaching this fall called Mapping Your Personal Mythology. If anyone wants to sign up, it's going to be online. So keep in touch with that. And then by cultivating conscious awareness, I believe that we can discover a deeper meaning and purpose and a capacity to understand who we are in a world that is increasingly interconnected, but also so data driven that we've lost a sense of purpose and meaning. And so, my belief and my desire is to take data and turn data back into mythology, to turn data back into meaning for humans, to humanize data. And so,
Humanized
yeah,
data.
yeah. So I've got a dream app that I'm building. So you can track your dreams, and then I will help interpret them, and then I'll look at the larger patterns over time, stuff like that.
What inspires you to like take that approach and just go in that direction, you know? And would you, I guess my follow-up to this question would be like, do you see yourself 5 years ago, from like the last time you were on the podcast, would that version of you see yourself doing this in any way, you know, like where you are currently?
Good question. I was not actively tracking my dreams or actively tracking these things in my life. And I wasn't as conscious back then. And so I had to go through a dark night of the soul. I went to graduate school for film at Florida State University. And I had gone through a lot personally and professionally. And so I went through kind of my Persephone years of just really figuring out who I am. Um, and during that time, I started to uncover the patterns in my own life. And those patterns led me to symbols and to start to build my own mythology and my own understanding of meaning, essentially, to create meaning for myself. And I always think that as children, our parents, if they have religion, we are given religion like clothing that we wear. And it might not fit us, we might not love it, but we embrace it at the time because that's all we have. So, my goal with Modern Mythic isn't about replacing anyone's religion or worldview, but it's about helping people become conscious enough to choose it for themselves. And so, by learning to notice the symbols, the patterns, the dreams, the relationships, and recurring themes in our own lives, whether it's through film, through music, through all these different areas, we can become more conscious creators and we can become better people. Well, so project wise, just so you know, I'm working on the feature project, but I'm also working on my next poetry collection, which I'm really excited about. Hopefully finishing by the spring, and then I'll start talking to publishers. And then music, I definitely am going to make an album, but my goal is to release at least one single a year until I have, yes, saved up enough money or raised enough money to do the full album. But I have plenty of songs and everything, and I talked to a producer in Nashville recently, so that was exciting. And yeah, I'm going to be teaching a lot. So if anyone wants to sign up for workshops, I'm teaching this fall and screenwriting. Seeing Feelingly is one of my workshops. Another is Through the Camera's Eye, which is for my methodology. And then Mapping Your Own Personal Mythology is another one. It's going to be a lot of fun. And that'll be this fall as well. But yeah, I'll just keep building off of that. And then I'm also writing the book, The Camera's Eye. So I think I have like 2 chapters so far. So once it's finished, that'll be really exciting.
You are wearing so many hats, doing everything at once. It seems like everything, everywhere, all at once.
Kind of. I think the way I like to, and I like to cycle through things. Part of it is like lack of funding for certain projects, but I do like to try to finish a new project every 6 months. So ideally, I would cycle through music for 6 months, then the next 6 months would be a book, and then the next 6 months would be a film. The next 6 months might be a break, and then a research project. So, kind of like that, I really want to stagger things and do it that way, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
And they're all elements of the same thing because for me, it's kind of like I'm trying to think of how to explain it. I know we're running out of time. I was just going to say, and I also do consulting. So if anyone wants consulting for a film project, music, or anything else, I definitely help with that a lot. I'm working on a couple of films this fall. And okay, so I would just say I work with writers, filmmakers, artists, and people with big ideas who may feel stuck, scattered, or unsure of how to move a project forward. Help with ideation, shaping the heart of a project. But I also bring my producer and project manager brain to help them get organized, build the infrastructure, and create their goals. Identifying the real obstacles and figuring out the practical next steps. And ultimately, whatever I'm doing, whatever project is part of this larger question where I'm drawn to the mythic layer of everything underneath ordinary life, which is about finding meaning and purpose and storytelling. And it just, whatever modality I use, it's all part of the same process.
And that's Emily Clark.